All right, good morning and welcome. Welcome to Moving to a Cloud-Enabled Infrastructure Without Sacrificing High Availability, presented by Vertex and Quorum. My name is Darren Pendergraft. I'll be your host for the webcast this morning, and I just wanted to give you a few housekeeping items before we get started. Couple things here. All lines will be muted during the webinar. This is just to keep the background noise down as much as possible and to give the speakers the full floor. But we would like to take your questions. Both speakers have said that they would be happy to answer questions. So the way you can ask questions of either speaker is to type your questions into the questions box that's in the panel for GoToWebinar. We'll do our best. We'll take as many questions as we can. We've planned this webcast not to go the full hour. We've definitely left some time for questions. So if you do type some questions in there, we'll take as many questions as we have time for. And obviously, if we have a question that's more detailed or complex, we will be very happy to address that via email. So we'll take as many questions as we can live. And then if there's other things that we feel require more of an in-depth conversation, we'll take them offline and we'll correspond via email with you to get you the information that you need. Finally, this presentation is being recorded and will be available as an on-demand download after the webcast. So let's meet our speakers. Michael Hager is a business development manager at Vertex Consulting, where he's responsible for managing the marketing and sales team. He has over 10 years in the IT industry and has been focused on security, VoIP, and backup solutions. Jason Snook is a solutions architect at Quorum, where he's primarily responsible for designing backup and recovery solutions to fit customer environments. He's an experienced IT professional with over 15 years in the industry, focused on network engineering, security engineering, and system administration. Gentlemen, welcome to the webcast this morning.
Thank you.
All right, to get us kicked off, I am going to hand the presentation over to Michael to get us started. So Michael, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Darren. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us. My name is Michael Hager. I'm a business development manager for Vertex Consulting. I'm very excited that you joined us today. We're going to cover a lot of useful information this morning. This webinar is designed to show you how to leverage the cloud without losing high availability. Before we get started, I want to quickly introduce you to Vertex Consulting. We were founded in 1996, and we just celebrated our 21st birthday. Yes, we did have some drinks. We specialize in helping companies of all sizes utilize the best-in-breed technology to maintain a fast, reliable, secure IT environment. As you know, the technology industry is rapidly changing, and here at Vertex, we work hard to stay ahead of the curve. We do this by partnering with industry-leading companies such as Quorum for backup, WatchGuard for security, Mitel for voice, and Ruckus for Wi-Fi. Next slide, please. At Vertex, we have the expertise and experience for projects of all levels. Most of our clients have multiple sites, and some of our clients have over 3,000 users that rely on us. We have experienced staff. Our average engineer has been with us for 9 years and have way more experience than 9 years. You can reach out to us by going to our website, vertex.com, and filling out the Contact Us form or call us directly. We'll be glad to help you out. Next slide, please. When I'm out discussing the cloud with companies, I often hear some of the following trends quite often. People are nervous about moving to the cloud. There are legitimate concerns about changing the way you've done IT for years. Losing control, monthly bill, security, just to name a few. So why do you need to move your technology to the cloud? Well, the short answer is it's better, faster, and cheaper. But Jason will help elaborate on that throughout this webinar as well. Another one we see is many companies are downsizing their data centers. In the past, companies would just keep growing their data centers and investing in hardware. As we know, times have changed. Companies don't have the budgets to keep growing their data centers or to buy new hardware every few years. So when I'm out in the field I hear a lot of companies struggling with this. Today, we're going to talk about how to handle that. One of the most common topics that I hear is the need for 24/7 uptime. What happened to our maintenance windows? With regular maintenance windows, unscheduled downtime is now becoming a problem. Applications are always up, employees and customers are always using them, and interruptions are avoided at all costs. This has forced many IT teams to find ways of doing maintenance and backups while applications are running. Jason, are you seeing the same or different trends?
Yeah, I mean, we see pretty similar trends. We in the data protection and business continuity world, we see all kinds of environments, and we still see a lot of on-prem. We see a lot of multiple SAN environments, mixed breed from multiple, hypervisors. Still, a lot of people have physical servers. But the trend is definitely A, it's not having any tolerance for downtime, and B, it's we've got this aging hardware. What's our next step? What's company technology 2.0 look like? And a lot of customers are looking at augmenting on-prem with some sort of public cloud for any sort of workspace. I mean, some people are putting file servers up there. Some people are using putting applications and databases up there. But a lot of them are still faced with the same demands, which are zero downtime, relatively easy to manage, and then bridging that gap between on-prem and whatever cloud service provider they're going at. So, yeah, without a doubt, we are seeing the exact same trends in the data protection, business continuity world.
All right, I'm sure we're going to talk about a solution now, so I'm going to turn it over to Jason, and let's talk about the solution we have for it.
Great. Yeah, so everyone, thanks a lot again for joining. So what I want to talk about today is I want to open up a new term to our library of definitions here. So high availability is something that we always, strive to build in our infrastructure. You could do it in multiple ways. Next slide, please, Darren. But high availability, it's the need behind it is to eliminate downtime, right? If you have a on-prem infrastructure that has multiple SANs, multiple hosts hosting a bunch of VMs, if you have a VM outage, you need to be able to resurrect that VM immediately. If you have a SAN outage that knocks down multiple VMs, you need to be able to fail over to a recovery VM immediately. Likewise, you need to be able to go back in time. And this is something that traditional high availability solutions don't do a great job at. HA solutions like, say, vMotion or Hyper-V clustering or the standard physical clustering tools that we've done in the past, they are decent at recovering from hardware outages, from maybe an independent VM failure, but they're not a backup solution. They've never been designed to go back in time, and also they've never been designed to have that 3-copy mentality. We've got production, you've got a copy of production locally, and then you've got another copy sitting somewhere completely geographically separate. So the importance of HA is to design something that you can have redundancy regardless of the outage, regardless of the environment that you're trying to protect. It's got to be a safety net. Next slide, please. So your standard HA design has always kind of been the same. You've got centralized storage, you've got a bunch of hosts, and then you've got VMs stacked on top of those. Now, VMware does a great job with vMotion, where you can literally shift a VM from one set of hosts to a completely another set of hosts. That provides the ability to say, hey, if I have a physical host failure, I don't have any downtime. Same way with Hyper-V clustering. Very similar technology where you've got shared storage and you've got hosts that are playing together to distribute virtual machines. Even hyperconverged infrastructure is doing a very similar idea. Let's say you've got a Nutanix or a Scale cluster. All of those guys are sharing compute and storage. So if you lose a host, it's no big deal. You just fail over to the working host until you can get the other host back up and running. But all of these guys, they have never been designed to be a backup solution to roll back in time 30, 40, 60, or 90 days or even beyond. These guys, HA has always been designed to resurrect from a hardware failure or a corruption issue, but they haven't been the best at, say, defeating your ransomware by being able to roll back in time to a known good state. So some of the gaps that I want to fill with the new HA design are that backup and recovery gap. I think we're beyond the days of having your infrastructure and then HA and then backup. I think you can now have your production infrastructure and HA and backup under one umbrella, under one solution set. So the other gap I see is that many HA designs, they use production for the ability to recover. And here's what I mean by that. You've got a shared SAN. What happens if your SAN goes down and you haven't been replicating your array via snapshots to a remote location? Well, if you use production for your recovery mechanism, you're subjecting yourself to risk of an outage from a single point of failure. So I'm a big believer that any recovery tool or any recovery design should be built on a completely separate stack. And by stack, I mean different hardware, different hypervisor, completely different mechanism to recovering the system. The other problem that I see with the traditional HA design is that it is insanely hardware intensive. If I've got 2 SANs, 10 hosts, and 100 VMs locally, I've got to build all of that hardware at a remote site to get that true business continuity plan, the ability to spin up VMs and reroute traffic almost instantly. Think about that. You're going to have a duplicate SAN infrastructure, duplicate host. They're all probably going to have to be running the same version of ESXi to get vMotion to function correctly. So it's incredibly hardware intensive, and with hardware comes capital. I mean, it's a very expensive design to upload. So the gap here is HA should be backup. It should run on a separate stack. It can't be too expensive and it can't be too complex. Next slide, please. So this is where high availability anywhere comes up. This is a term that we came up with here at Quorum to describe what we think high availability should include. It should put the choice of deployment back into your hands. It should reduce complexity and cost for everyone who's deploying it. It should be on a separate stack. And if you want cloud, you should have the ability to plug in cloud as flexible as you want. And it's a traditional recovery platform, meaning you've got retention that you can fail back to. This is our simplistic definition of what an HA Anywhere design should look like. Next slide, please. So if we were to whiteboard, blank slate a company and say, let's start building an HA Anywhere design. Well, you start off with your infrastructure, right? You could be a VMware customer, you could be a Hyper-V customer, you could be a Xen, KVM, you could roll out Nutanix or scale hyper-converged nodes if you want. Doesn't matter. That's your production system. HA Anywhere should be a flexible component where you protect the local on-prem with a copy of it sitting on-prem, and then you hold another copy of it sitting off-site. Now, these should be seen under the same management window. In my opinion, they should be running on a completely separate stack. Don't get yourself into a position where you are leveraging your production infrastructure for your ability to recover from a production outage. It's a design that will end up biting you later on down the road. Again, HA Anywhere, this has got to be a flexible design where if I have 10 different sites and some, let's say, AWS instances, I want one vendor that I can go to and I can plug in high availability and backup and recovery functionality into all 10 sites plus that AWS instance. And I want it all wrapped up into a single interface, a single ecosystem. So let's call this let's say, for example, my recovery partner or my recovery vendor is now the person who is responsible for making sure that if I lose a site, I can power up that site remotely. If I lose a SAN and it affects, let's say, 20 VMs, I can power up 20 VMs almost instantly somewhere else. So this is the idea behind designing HA Anywhere. Next slide, please. Here's an example. Again, I want the ability to protect local VMs and physical servers, remote VMs and physical servers, any public cloud instance that you have invested in. And I want to be able to create a way that you can recover from any variety of outage. So if you write down a bulleted list of, hey, what could happen to my data center? It could be anything from corruption to ransomware to physical failure to someone unplugging the lights, storm, whatever the case is. You want to build in a solution for all variables. And HA Anywhere is that solution. It is a solution where you can have protection locally on your on-prem plus a cloud protection, but it's all seen under one umbrella, one dashboard. Or let's say you're a company that says, I don't want to invest in hardware anymore. I'm sick and tired of owning hardware. Instead, with HA Anywhere, you could say, I want to back everything up to the cloud. And I'm not talking about just sending data up to the cloud like a Carbonite or something like that. I'm talking about literally taking a copy of your data center and putting it in someone else's private cloud. That's what HA Anywhere should do. It should be a flexible solution where you can have either or and as far as local on-prem protection versus cloud protection. Let's work out a scenario here that I heard the other day. A customer has, they've got an on-prem site with a very serious investment in infrastructure that is aging, and they are looking at two different options. They're looking at, they're going to go down the path of all EMC storage. They're going to go back with Dell servers for their hosts, and they're going to stick with VMware. This is a pretty traditional approach. So that particular upgrade has a dollar value to it. It's a pretty substantial capital cost on top of being a kind of a beast to maintain. Versus they're going to look at doing a mix of AWS and Google Cloud Compute and connect those guys together with a VPC, a virtual private connection. So they're looking at something where they can start offloading some of those pretty capital intensive on-prem designs to the cloud. But they came to us and they said, well, these are our thoughts. What do you guys think about this? You know, we're the data protection experts and business continuity planners. So what do we think about it? And we say, well, you know, AWS is awesome. Google Cloud Compute is fantastic. However, what we have been told over and over is there's a lot of anxiety towards going from on-prem to cloud. There's a lot of questions of, okay, if it doesn't go my way, how do I get out? What's my way out? Well, we can build a solution where we can literally take a copy of everything on-prem, take a copy of everything that you've invested in AWS, and we'll hold it for you in a bootable state until you're comfortable with your decision to move over to AWS or GCP or whatever cloud provider you're going. We are that partner that can do that. Next slide, please. So let's talk about what Quorum does for HA Anywhere, so high availability anywhere. We have the ability to protect local on-prem infrastructure. So again, it could be SAN data, it could be VMs from literally any hypervisor, any HCI vendor, so any hyperconverged infrastructure, we can still make a copy of what you guys have built. And so with us, you can have that single vendor that protects virtual, that protects physical, that protects all applications and connected data, not only on-prem, but also in the cloud. And the way that we do that is we are going to build a layer 2 bridge between you and us. Now, our data centers are private. They're 100% private. This is infrastructure and space that we maintain, that we secure. It's all SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. It's all PCI compliant. We passed our HIPAA certification. We are a company that takes data security very seriously, in that everything is private and everything is encrypted. So all data that we collect is encrypted over the wire, and then it's encrypted again when it lands. You only have to pay for what you use. You can get public IP addresses for failover of external web services. And then you can get internal access by standard VPN connectivity. So with us, what you can do is you can take your on-prem infrastructure, for example, and you can say, you know, these 50 VMs that don't change a lot, I don't want to pay for hardware to protect those locally. I want to ship it directly to the cloud. You can do that. Now, any servers that you don't want to ship directly to the cloud, let's say you've got a performance concern with a highly transactional SQL server, or let's say you have a server that you're really cloud averse, you're not comfortable with putting it somewhere else, you can always, with Quorum, put in a local purpose-built backup and recovery appliance at your on-prem site that will protect those servers. Now, from the management point of view, it's seen as one dashboard. It's seen as a single IP address. It's going to live in the cloud or it's going to live local, but it's going to look like it's on your subnet. So you have the ability to say, hey, my server number 10, which it was backed up to Quorum's cloud, it failed. How do I get it back up and running? Well, with us, you just click a button, and about a minute later, it's running. What happens about that? What about that SQL server that failed overnight, or that Windows file server that failed after the last Windows update? Again, if you have a backup local, you can click a button, and it'll spin up a copy of it local. If you had it sent to the cloud, click a button, and it'll spin it up in the cloud. The recovery looks the same. It takes about 1 to 3 minutes typically. So your RTO is about typically less than 5 minutes. And then at that point, you're back up and running, and you can decide how you want to resurrect that production server. So this is how you combine traditional HA, high availability solutions like vMotion and Hyper-V clustering, with the ability to be a backup and recovery technology as well. So you can roll back in time. We hold all backup data for at least 30 days. Typically, we push it out to 45 or 60 days. It's all based on what our customers tell us as far as what they need. Next slide, please. So let's wrap up the HA Anywhere, and I want to kick it back over to Michael to see what his thoughts are on as far as when he talks to customers, where this kind of trend is. Where, again, we talk about trends of what we see in the space. 2 years ago, when I would go do a conference and I'd say, hey, anyone here, raise your hand of who's putting any workloads in the cloud, and I might get 1 out of 100 that would say, yeah, I'm investing in AWS. Well, now it's not like that anymore. If I do the same 100-person crowd and I say who is putting workloads in the cloud, and I might get 10 to 20, and a lot of those are all hybrid solutions. They still have on-prem, they still have their partnerships with their SaaS providers, and now they're integrating workloads into AWS, GCP, Azure. So I think we're at that bell curve where we're finally starting to see customers push over towards cloud infrastructure. So again, high availability is designed it's a flexible protection architecture that will literally fit any environment that you can think of, as well as give you the ability to resurrect servers regardless of the outage. So we're going to be able to combine our private cloud with local protection or remote protection to meet your RTO, your recovery needs. We can provide that high availability, that backend recovery as a service solution, where in the cloud you only pay for what you use. We are the separate stack. Quorum is the hardware. We are the hypervisor. We are the backup and recovery software tool that takes snapshots of servers and holds them on our solution. We are the entire recovery stack. We do not leverage anything from your production network to recover VMs. And finally, we take security very seriously. Everything that we collect is encrypted, not only in motion and at rest. So rest assured that if you decide to send your data to us in our private cloud, it's going to be secure. Michael, give me your thoughts. After hearing about the whole idea behind HA Anywhere, how does that play into what you've heard with customers?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely can relate to your story of asking a crowd how many people are moving their stuff to the cloud. We're seeing actually a higher number than that. A lot of them are starting out small, moving over to Office 365, but a lot of them are going more advanced and adding on. And we have several customers that are Quorum and been Quorum for years. I would echo what you said about the security and encryption. We deal with a lot of federal and government clients that, it's a requirement to have it secure. So yeah, we are seeing a lot of customers slowly start to convert over, but this year and last year we saw a larger rate converting over.
Cool. What barriers? If you're in that same room that I'm in and you're saying, you're seeing a higher adoption rate. What are the people who have not adopted? What do they tell you as their barrier for not going into utility computing or public cloud space?
I think a lot of them were security. Sometimes we deal with smaller and mid-sized. We also do enterprise as well, where security is an issue. But actually, moving to the cloud is a better option for them. And we explain that, a lot of times they're short-staffed on IT. They don't have the manpower to, work on security, let alone do the daily functions. So moving to the cloud, they actually have a team of professionals that can help them secure their data.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of them.
Have you heard of any horror stories with going to public cloud? I'll give you one. This is one I've heard a couple times, which is company decided to jump over to public cloud, and they received their estimate prior to building out their infrastructure in AWS, and then 6 months later, they have everything built up. They've got the exact number of VMs, the exact number of storage, S3 storage that they wanted, and yet their quote and their bill is almost 2x. So I mean that's something I've heard a lot. What have you heard as far as negative stories in shifting over to public cloud?
We're not really hearing a lot of negative stories. I do have a horror story of a client that moved over to the cloud, and the provider actually went out of business, but they just chose the wrong provider. So that's the story I heard. So in another barrier I hear a lot is the IT staff reduction. I hear that sometimes as well. But quite honestly, we're not seeing that happen at all. We're actually seeing it becoming more efficient, allowing the IT professionals to do what they're great at, and that's to increase productivity. So that's a barrier that we hear sometimes, but that's slowly going away, because I think everyone in the industry is starting to see that's a false statement.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing specifically about staff. I mean, you talk to people who have added staff because they're more productive. So instead of spending the time doing break fix and firmware updates on hardware and even complex desktop support, instead what they're doing is they're educating their IT staff to be more, I guess, forward thinking and thinking, okay, what can we actually get out of our IT investment? If I wanted to provision, let's say, a new app to make a part of the company more productive, all they have to do is provision an app and start testing it and then figuring out how to deploy it, as opposed to in the old days having to spend a lot of your hours soaked into the hardware side, or soaked into learning how to run the hypervisor, learning how to spool up the VMs. So I've seen the exact same scenario where IT departments are actually growing and becoming more productive and helping companies use technology to better their companies than ever before.
Another barrier I see is, they're worried about the disruption and loss of productivity during the rollout. And that's where we kind of come in play is, we help the client actually install it, training, and help them make sure they know how to use it. And we work side by side to make sure they're experts in it by the time it's all set up.
Yeah, that leads into another, we could talk probably for hours on this, but we in the data protection and business continuity side, we're pretty darn good at architecting a solution to provide uptime, but then we turn it over to our customers, and then it becomes a solution that it's the customer knows about it, they understand it, they do their DR test, but the gap that they're missing typically comes from partners like yourself, who are experienced in business continuity planning and the overall health and strategy of a customer's IT deployment. And so many times we will finish our deployment, and then we'll say, okay, it's really time you guys think about engaging with a MSP or a consultant like Vertex to say, these are the smart guys in the overall health of your infrastructure. You've got uptime, but what's next? And what's next is a lot of times it's the overall business continuity planning and how they're going to roll into whatever the 2.0 phase of their IT infrastructure looks like. And I'm always excited for those conversations because our platform is so extensible. I mean, it can go, we can protect AWS, we can protect on-prem, physical, virtual. So it's always a great lead-in for us because it's, you know, again, our platform is designed to be extensible to almost any infrastructure.
All right. Great conversation, great back and forth, guys. I want to invite the audience to send their questions in. We do have a couple things that have come up throughout the discussion, so we'll get started with those. But audience, if you have any questions for either of our speakers, go ahead and type them into the questions panel in the GoToWebinar console, and we'll take as many questions as we can. Okay. Look, you guys touched on this a little bit, Michael. I think you addressed this kind of in your opening, but one of the questions is, you know, it sounds great. I'm having a hard time getting budget for cloud services. What do you guys recommend? I think, you know, Michael, you made a comment earlier that cloud's cheaper, but it's a different kind of budget very often. So could you just kind of elaborate on that a little bit? And Jason, if you have any additional insight, can you just add that in as well?
It really comes down to, you know, capex and opex. I think a lot of companies are in the past familiar just to pay everything up front and say, this is why we do it. It's done. We own the equipment. But they're finding out that's, you know, the equipment's outdated. It's, you know, in years it comes down, you know, so they'll have to rebuy it again. You know, with the cloud and the, you know, the monthly bill, they're allowing to have the upgraded equipment. They can plan their expenses and kind of, you know, scatter it out instead of paying, you know, using all that capital up front. They can use it for something else in their business. And, you know, we've worked with a lot of companies to successfully roll out and get approval to move to the cloud just by, you know, demonstrating that to their higher ups and, you know, the cost benefits and the savings in the long run.
Yeah, I've seen, you know, very similar instance where it's surprising how much sway that the CFO in a company can have towards IT. I mean, if the CFO has that personality where they're good with, they know what's coming in the door, and they're good with an operational expense and floating out, you know, knowing what they're committing to on a monthly basis. If they're good with that and they see the light on an OPEX expenditure plan for IT, then utility or cloud computing is a absolute no-brainer. If they're of the mindset that they would rather pay off the infrastructure and then, you know, look at their ROI in terms of, you know, years of capital expenses, then by all means they're you know, on-prem and that way is probably the way for them. So I've seen the same thing where the personality of the CFO, man, he can drive the IT decisions back and forth.
Yep. And I had to smile at this, guys, because you know, sometimes it's not the technical issues that trip you up, but it's the financial ones. So that was a great question. Okay, moving on. Let's see. So we're a VMware shop. We want to do more with Cloud HA. What do you recommend? For either one of you guys, whoever wants to take that one. VMware shop predominantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you know, for HA, for VMware, you can do the traditional vMotion route. You can do, you know, SRM. Those are pretty costly investments, though, and they don't scratch that itch where we're talking about backups. I mean, those are the ability to fail over and replicate, but the ability to roll back in time is something that we excel at, and we could literally replace SRM and vMotion with a single solution that also does backup and recovery.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we're seeing more and more VM shops going to the cloud, going to it. So yeah, that's not an issue.
Yeah, you would think that people that have taken the jump to virtualization, you know, would have less concern about where the host is, right? Because the concept would be put it wherever you could put it, wherever there's a host available. So just having a cloud host, it seems conceptually would be easier, but anyway, it could potentially be more complicated depending on how you do it. Okay, so one about testing. These are always my favorite because we all know we should be testing our DR plan and none of us do. So the question is, if I have backups or snapshots in the cloud, how do I test them? And Jason, you mentioned some high costs, some surprise costs, and I know there sometimes can be some surprise charges for testing. So I don't know, maybe you want to get us kicked off on that one.
Yeah, we've tried as a company at Quorum to be as simple and as transparent as possible. So we don't charge for runtime or network ingress or egress. We don't charge for any of that stuff. There's just a bottom line price. And we did that specifically because customers told us, listen, AWS was awesome. They only charge you, X dollars a day to run a VM. That's great. We can scale that out. We know what we're paying. However, in a DR scenario, you're paying for kind of cold storage, and you only use it whenever you need it. And a lot of cloud-based disaster recovery and business continuity companies will charge you one thing, and then they'll charge you a whole nother whenever you decide to actually use it or test it. And that really stings. And so we got away from that model. We've never actually done that model. With Quorum, you don't ever pay if you run. So if you want to do a 2-week DR test, do it, and we won't charge you anything extra. And again, we're completely transparent on what your fees will be, where a lot of customers will, I would never use the term bait and switch, but they hide what you're actually going to be charged if you run from their infrastructure. So be aware of that if you're looking at any sort of cloud-based BDR solution.
Yeah, I can echo Jason there as well. We have several Quorum customers, and we help them out to test up their backup and no cost, ease of use, and they're very happy with it. So can't say that with all the solutions out there, but Quorum is a great product for that.
Okay, just one follow-on, Jason. You mentioned data egress and some potential charges there. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, AWS has a calculator for when you put data into, let's say even, Glacier, Amazon has this cool feature where you do cold storage with Glacier. Pretty easy, super, super cheap. I don't know what the running price is now. But to pull the data out, it is incredibly expensive per terabyte. And they charge that based on kind of a metered system, which, the data is streaming out of their network and you get charged per terabyte that is coming out. So it's kind of a sticky thing to deal with is the challenges of providing a solution where you want to know how much you're paying and you don't want to be surprised. And a lot of companies will charge you for kind of like a meter, kind of like an electric meter. Once the data's coming out, the meter starts and you start paying for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, all right, thanks for that. Looks like we have one more. It looks like it's kind of related to maybe some hidden costs or costs that people don't think about. If I back up and recover in the cloud, do I need more licenses? So I'm supposing that's server licenses or app licenses, or I don't know. You guys want to take that one?
Yeah, Michael, I'll kick that one over to you. And licensing is one of those topics that it could be all over the place. It could go so many different directions. It all depends on the OS license that they invested in on day one.
Yeah, that's a very complex question there, and I definitely need some more details on that. So I'd like for you, Jason, your experience on it. So.
Yeah, I mean, with Microsoft OS licensing, server OS licensing, you can do OEM, you can do volume licensing, you can buy software assurance. I highly encourage every customer to look at their own licensing. For example, if you have volume licensing for your server OSs with software assurance, I believe Microsoft by default gives you 30 days of DR runtime. So you have like 30 days until you're in breach of licensing contract with them. Whereas if you have an OEM license, right, you buy a box from Dell and it came with a pre-installed OEM license, I don't think they give you 30 days. But again, this is something that every IT shop needs to do their own due diligence to find out when they break the licensing contract and when they don't.
All right. So I guess the takeaway there is it depends is the answer, right? And protect yourself, check your licensing, check with your vendors, make sure you understand what the licensing agreements are. All right, gentlemen, that is the end of our questions. So on behalf of the audience, I want to thank you both for your time today. And to the audience, on behalf of Vertex and Quorum, I want to say thank you. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your participation. We are going to end the webcast here. Thank you very much. Have a great day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.